So welcome back to today's video. This isn't the planned video for this week, but I'm answering a message that's come from one of our regular viewers. So this one is for Joan. Joan sent me this gorgeous photo that will just pop up here on my side of a design that she's planning to do in her local flower club, and she wanted a bit of help and guidance on how to create it. So I'm going to do a similar design. It's not going to be the same, but I'm going to explain the principles and the sort of rules behind how you would create this arrangement. I haven't got the same flower content. I've got something that's quite similar, and I've chosen to use some spring flowers, some twigs, which you know I really like to use. And I'm going to talk you through a couple of alternatives on how you could create the base, because this one has quite a high level technique to it. And it's an arrangement that some of you struggle to do because you don't like not having those symmetrical positions of the flowers. So when we learn floral design, we often learn those very geometric shapes and patterns, and we instinctively want to place flowers that are matching on either side. This design that we're looking at today is more like the arrangement I did last week, where I arrange flowers in that very natural garden style. And that's pretty much what vegetative means. It means that you're arranging flowers. If you're doing it properly, it will be flowers of the same season, and you would arrange them as they would grow up in the garden. So trees would be the taller material, flowers that grow on the ground would be the lower material, and then everything would have its own placement within that floral design. And it's quite a high level style of arranging. If you're at college or you're attending floral design lessons and you're in the sort of beginners or level 1 category, then you learn to do a very stiff parallel arrangement that's often referred to as a continental design. It's often referred to as modern. I never know why it's called a modern design, because we first saw it in the 1980s, and the parallel design has moved on in lots of ways from that design that we looked at in the 80s. I was arranging in the 1980s, from 1987. So for me, that parallel design that we see in magazines and books is certainly not a modern design. How many years ago is that? Too many years for me to count, really. So in the photograph that Joan has provided me with, the base has been constructed using a Posy Pad, and I appreciate that not everybody can get hold of a Posy Pad, so I've got a few alternatives. If you're part of my Facebook group and you've watched a little snippet of me doing some shopping in Tesco, I very recently, in fact it was only yesterday, picked up these biscuit tins. I couldn't think what they were called. So these are little spring biscuit tins. I think they were for Easter, but they were reduced in Tesco, and that would create a really good base for this particular floral design, because it covers the edge of the design really quickly, and you can put floral foam in there. I'm going to show you an alternative in a minute that you could do with bottles, but you would fill that up with floral foam, and then you haven't got the worry about covering that plastic edge around the outside, which is what we're going to do with the Posy Pad. I'm going to have to look at a way of covering the edge. If you've got anything that's deep, so it doesn't have to be a biscuit barrel, it can be a wooden container like this, you can create exactly the same design, but by ensuring that your foam is below the level of the container. And that's one of the tricks with the parallel. If you've got a large amount of foam showing, then you need lots of moss or foliage to cover the base, and then the design looks really heavy. So I mentioned you can do this without foam. The best way of getting those sort of parallel placements is to use a container with plastic or glass bottles in it, anything that will hold water. You could do this in a much larger scale and put recycled plastic glasses and bottles in there, but you would fill up your little bottles and you would just place your flowers in there in a very informal, natural way. And I'm planning on introducing a members only section to the website, and I'm going to do this design as one of the first videos that will be over on there, and that will be a paid part of the channel for you to get instructions on more advanced floral design. Okay, so this is the Posy Pad. This is a 12-inch Posy Pad. It has a very small amount of foam, and one of the issues with this is that you can't go particularly tall because the depth of the foam doesn't allow you to, and it has this polystyrene base to it. So none of that is recyclable. and that would all have to go into landfill. So for those of you that are looking for more environmentally friendly options, the bottles would be much better. In the photo that we looked at, the edge has been covered with moss that comes on a roll. It's like an artificial moss. Not everybody can get hold of that, so I've suggested a couple of different alternatives. You could use ribbon, fabric, hessian. If you've got wallpaper, then you could put a plastic seal around here with some cling film and then put a strip of wallpaper around it. If you've got any strips of artificial grass, that would work quite nicely around the outside. So look for something that's within your budget. And I'm going to use some cork. Now you might not have seen cork before, but this comes on a roll from some florist supplies. I'm pretty confident that this is waterproof, but I'm going to add a layer around the outside of my foam with some ribbon first, just in case the water seeps out and ruins my cork. This has come from, I think, Southeast Sundries. So if you're not familiar with Southeast Sundries, I'll add them to the description box at the end, and they've got a website where you can buy florist supplies. They're quite often at the florist events and the flower arranging events, but they do have an online shop. Whether this is still on there, I've got absolutely no idea. But you just need to think of something that's flexible, that will go round the outside quite neatly, and is going to give us a nice finish to the design. Now I do tend to talk quite a lot in these videos, and that's because I'm a trained teacher and I like to make sure that you've got all the basic information that you need. If you feel that you know all this information, just fast forward to the bit where I start adding the flowers, because that's a lot prettier. So this is poly tie ribbon. This is the plastic coated ribbon that will act as almost like a waterproof shield between my floral foam and my cork. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use dressmaker's pins or these are corsage pins. I'm going to use corsage pins just to attach my waterproof ribbon around the edge of my container. And I'll flip this up in a minute and show you it on the overhead camera. But that hopefully will give me a nice seal. And I'm using corsage pins really because they're more visible for you on the camera. Steel pins or dressmaker's pins are better because they don't have that decorative edge. I don't feel that pearls go with my springtime feel, so it wouldn't be my first choice. I would rather something that you couldn't see. So what I'm probably going to do at the end is go round again with a decorative ribbon just so that I cover the pearl pins. Because for me, pearl pins are elegant and sophisticated. They don't really go with that springtime, natural country sort of look. So let's just tip that forward. You'll see that I've run that ribbon around the outside to give me a waterproof layer. You could do that with glue or double-sided sellotape. I've done pearls for ease, really, to make it, it's a bit difficult when you're filming to use the glue gun at the same time. So what I'm going to do now is take the ribbon round, it's not ribbon, this is the cork. I'm going to take the cork round and I'm going to pin into the hard base at the bottom. So I'm not going into the foam, I'm going into that polystyrene base at the bottom. If I go into the foam, then I've got risk of puncturing it and then the water seeping through. So I'm going to take my time, I'm going to work my way around the bottom. Hopefully it's going to be straight, but I don't want to spend too long doing it because it's probably going to be a little bit boring for you to watch. Now, if I was doing this for an actual job or competition, church flowers, something like that, I would make sure that all these pins were equally spaced out. And where I'm finishing the cork, I finished it really neatly. It's a bit wonky today, but I can't do two things at the same time. I can't talk to you and give my design really good finish. So that now has covered the edge of my design. It's given me a nice neat finish and it makes my design far more presentable. And because I've got some twigs, it's going to give me a nice colour link with the twigs on the top. What you need to think about is the colours being quite earthy and quite rustic. It's almost representing the ground. It could be sand or it could be mud, it could be something that's down on the ground, it could be dry and dying moss. But the idea with this arrangement is that what you see on the bottom is what you would find in nature on the bottom. And you could do this really nicely with either of those containers I showed you at the beginning, and you can do it really nicely with a foam frame wreath ring as well. And you could sit something in the middle like an Easter egg or a bottle of wine to make it suitable for a gift. Right, so I've gone around the outside there with my cork, and that gives me quite a neat finish. Now I'm going to add some base weight in here. Again, I'm trying to represent the ground. In the photograph we looked at, there's lots of conifer, but I've got conifer and heather because in the spring, that's what you would often find covering the ground. And I've cut some to short little pieces so that it's already done, so I can sort of speed the process up. And what I'm doing here is I'm arranging them in parallel positions. I'm not worried about them all being the same height. I'm making sure that they're in that parallel placement. So they are facing upwards, not radiating out from the center point. And this is the start of that parallel arrangement. If you think about grass, reeds, plants, anything that grows low down, it grows straight up towards the sun. It grows away from gravity and up towards the sun. We don't have everything arranged like we do in those geometric shapes. This is a much more natural way of arranging. And I think this is a great one to do if you've got family visiting you. You might have grandchildren, great-grandchildren, nieces, whatever, coming to see you, because you don't have to overthink it. You could pick up a fairly inexpensive bunch of flowers from the supermarket. You could go out, forage for materials, and you could get your little companions to place the flowers in upright without overthinking it and trying to create a particular shape. Now, I forgot to mention that the Posy Pad has been soaked in water. I've sat it on top of a bucket that's wide enough to accommodate the Posy Pad, and I've left it to sink under its own weight. The Posy Pad probably won't sink to the bottom because you've got that polystyrene base to it and it will almost float. So it's almost like a cake. So this is like a layer of a cake. And then the materials on the inside are all facing upwards in that parallel style. And then I'm going to go around and add in some pieces of white heather. Now I have cut these in advance. They all have had a clean cut. So for anybody watching that's going to criticise me for not cutting my stems, I have just this second done it. It's just you don't see it because I edited it out. And it's going to introduce a little bit of white colour, and we've got a fairly good even distribution there at the base in that very natural way. I've used conifer and heather, but anything that's bunchy, pittosporum, like I used in last week's video, and if you haven't seen that, I'll link it here so you can pop back and have a look. And I've made it's almost like a little tuft of grass there at the base. I've just made it so that you can see a little bit of the greenery throughout the edge. You can make it thicker if you want, and you could make it the same thickness as the design. And I just thought felt is a really good item to go around the outside. If you see felt, you can quite often pick it up in sewing shops fairly inexpensively. That would work really well around the outside. So the next thing I'm going to do is put in some height, and this time I have some beautiful twigs and branches. So because this design is wide, we're going to work off those proportions, and what you're going to do is go really tall, so about twice the height of the container. Or if you've been with me on any of the courses, then you can look at using the 3/5/8 proportions, but that's a bit complicated for me to explain in one of these short tutorials. Now, I'm not quite sure what these are. I've just picked these when I've been out walking, and I love the colour. I thought the colour link between the base and the stems at the top is going to work really well. And then I've got some birch. And what I'm doing is placing them in parallel lines. and I'm working with them so that we've got them in groups of 3s rather than matching pairs on the opposite side. Now the first 2 pieces I put in, I don't have anything to match them, so they've got to go in diagonally in a group of 2, and you might be able to see I'm having a bit of difficulty because some of the branches are moving around, and that's because the foam in a Posy Pad isn't really deep enough for this type of design. Now I would say that this design is all round, sorry, but because I've got that join where the ribbon or the cork meets at the back, I'm going to do this as a front facing arrangement, but it's because it's in a round container, it would work really well as an all-round design. You could do this on a long and low container, it doesn't have to be round. The main focus on this arrangement is that everything is parallel and they're facing up towards the sky. Now you might be looking and you might be thinking, well Sharon, that one you've just placed in isn't parallel. Well the bottom placements are all parallel. It doesn't matter if some of the tops are crossing. You will see that a few of them are moving around, and that's because I haven't got the depth in the foam to support them. But what I can do is take a section off the bottom. If I just put that in the, let's find a place in the camera. What I've done is I've almost squared off the end so that when it goes in the foam, it's not going to rotate around quite so much. But that's probably one of the issues of using a Posy Pad. I would have chosen to use a deeper container where we could have had bigger foam in it if I was doing this my way. So, or you could have added some foam onto the top there to make it thicker and wider. So my first placement of flowers is going to be some iris, and the iris are a soft stem flower, so we're better off cutting those straight across rather than at an angle because they go into the foam much better when the stem is thicker at the bottom. And I'm going to look at arranging them in sort of groups. So if you think about how irises would come up in the garden, they would be in a cluster. They wouldn't be perfectly matching on either side. They would possibly be at different heights. The heads would be facing in slightly different directions, and they wouldn't be perfectly arranged. So in my little garden, I've got 2 irises that are coming up on one side, and I've got one coming up on the opposite side. And what I've done is I've created a triangle effect between the 3 flowers rather than placing them perfectly opposite one another. And then I'm going to do a similar style, but this time I'm lowering them down to bring your eye slightly downwards, and I'm going to create one at the back here. So I now have a triangle forming between these 2 at the back and that one there at what I'm calling the front. So hopefully just like they would come up out of the garden in little clusters, not arranged in that really preconceived style. It's something loose and very, very natural. Now to pick up a little bit on the white colouring of the heather at the bottom, I'm now going to add in some pussy willows, a couple of tall ones to give me those parallel lines together in a group, and then I'm going to bring another set onto the opposite side and one towards the front where the camera is watching. If you're making a round arrangement, keep turning it around so that you're evenly distributing the colours and the textures. I'm trying to remember that I'm doing this as more of a front-facing arrangement. And if you're arranging for the house or for the church, there's a good chance that this design is only going to be seen from one side, so you can focus on arranging the flowers from one position. Now I've got some little scented narcissi, and before I put too many flowers in, I'm going to bring some of this colour towards the middle. So I'm thinking my sort of tip of the day would be, if you haven't done this style of arranging before in a Posy Pad, I would suggest adding some extra foam to the top, because these twigs are a little bit unstable. because I don't have the depth in the foam to support the flowers. Daffodils are soft stemmed, so when you're arranging in foam, cut them straight across. Don't cut them at an angle. They're fine to cut at an angle when they're going into water, but they won't go into foam when you've taken all the strength away from the base of that stem. Now I've chosen to use daffodils that are open because it's more visually impressive for you watching on the camera, but you could do this with closed daffodils and then you can watch them opening and you can really enjoy them as they're opening up. I do get some silly comments sometimes that people are saying that the flowers aren't going to last very well because they're open. The reason they're open, I'm sure you can work out, is so that you can have maximum enjoyment during the video itself. Now, one thing that's really important in this style of arranging is the space within the arrangement itself. We don't want to overfill it. We need to be able to see those clear parallel lines, and we need to appreciate the space within the arrangement and not clutter it up too much. I just think I need one of these on the inside. I'm a little bit fiddly getting it in the middle, but we got there in the end. So it needs to have that really translucent effect. You need to be able to see through it and to appreciate that negative space. Really don't think about overfilling it and putting too many flowers in. I'm thinking that the thickness of this framework here that I've got around the outside is a little heavy in comparison to the lighter flowers on the top, but it's going to have to do for today. So my feedback to myself would be to thin this out and not have it quite so wide, as I just feel it's a little visually heavy at the bottom. I'm going to finish off now with some tulips. The difficulty with tulips is that they have a mind of their own, and it doesn't matter what you do to them. Sticking a pin in the head, putting them in with a coin, putting them in aspirin, whatever little tricks you followed, and they're naturally going to move within the arrangement itself. So we're going to put them in nice and straight today, but by tomorrow they're going to be all over the place. And tulips continue to grow up to 4 inches after they've been cut from the plant. So they're going to be a cheeky one. They're going to keep on doing things that you don't want them to do. Now, what I'm aiming to do is not to have any flowers on the same level. It's a little hard to do when I'm talking to you at the same time, but each time I put a flower in, I'm trying to avoid it being on exactly the same position as another flower, and I'm trying to get things in triangles rather than in matching pairs opposite one another. Now, when those irises have opened more, and we've got 3 heads of the irises in there, it is going to create some visual weight higher up in the design, and I think that will compensate for the heaviness of the cork at the bottom. But what I am going to do is add in a couple more of the open daffodils, quite low down on the base, and that will help bring a little colour to the bottom. If you're using something like Muscari or little flowers from the garden, then you would place them in at the base. Think about how everything grows and arrange with them in the location they would be in the garden. And I might even cut this a bit thinner before I take a photograph, or I might even do a before and after photograph so you can understand what I'm trying to explain. So this one is a garden foliage. This is bridal spirea. Again, it's going to draw your eye slightly away, but that's okay because it's the natural arrangement that we're trying to create. And the stem itself is going in that parallel position. This is going to give me a lovely link in colour with the heather at the base. It's also going to strengthen the height, and it's going to bring that lovely springtime soft look that I'm hoping to create. Now, I am removing a fair amount of the greenery at the bottom so that I don't over clutter this design, and I'm arranging it so that I have that triangle position rather than a matching symmetrical design on either side. And I'm just going to finish it off with some really delicate, dainty Muscari. I did mention earlier on that it would be a good place to put them at the bottom, and that's what I'm going to do here. If you think about them in the garden again, they would come up in little clusters. So a little delicate group there of maybe 4 or 5 heads. So a little group here of, oh, that one snapped. Let's pop that back in again. A little group here of 5 heads, just really delicately sitting there. That one's not going the way I want it to, so let's rearrange that one. Now they are really delicate and really soft, so take your time if you are using them. And I think I'm going to do a cluster of about 5 there. I'm going to turn it round now because I need to remember that I have a front to this one. So I can do another little group here in amongst the heather, or just by the side of the heather. And then I think I'm pretty much finished. Now, I mentioned during the video a couple of the elements and principles of design, and that's what we tend to use to create our floral arrangements. It's almost like the guidelines that we follow in floral design. And I've normally got handouts on Etsy, but I've moved from Etsy. I'm now with Stan Store, so you'll find a link at the end where you'll find some handouts and some downloadable information that will help you understand floral design a little more. So that is my vegetative parallel design for today. You're going to aim for flowers at slightly different levels. Visualize what your border would look like during the summer. If you don't have a garden at home, have a look at magazine photographs of country parks and stately homes and see how their herbaceous borders look. And this is a similar sort of pattern. I'm still thinking that I'm going to make this a bit narrower so it's not quite so heavy at the bottom. And that is my version of that lovely design that was sent to me by Joan. I hope that's helped you create the arrangement. If you're new to the channel, then my name is Sharon. Thank you very much for coming and watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell to be told every time I upload a new tutorial, and stay till the end because you will see close-ups of the flowers and the arrangement, and you can enjoy the flowers in more detail. So thanks for watching and goodbye for now. Welcome back. I bet you didn't think you were going to be back this quickly. So what I've gone and done is I've made the cork base thinner, and I've put two strips around there to make it a bit more decorative. Now, and I feel that that's a much better size in proportion to the rest of the design. Before I felt it was too thick. So I think that now looks much prettier, it's softer, it's daintier, and I really love it. It's going to look fabulous. It's going to really evolve as the flowers start to open, and it's going to change shape as the tulips start to go through and those irises open. It's a really lovely one to display at home, and there's a selection of flowers in there that's really easy to get hold of. So thanks for coming back.